The girl who sold hand-painted cards outside Osgood Hall on the coldest Tuesday of November had exactly one card left when she noticed the man in the grey suit crying on the bench. She had been watching him for several minutes, the way she always watched people before deciding whether to approach. He wasn't the kind of man who looked like he belonged on that bench, the bench near the frozen fountain, half hidden by bare elms that rattled in the November wind off Lake Ontario. He wore a coat that probably cost more than what Nell Carver's grandmother paid in 3 months of rent, and his shoes were the kind that shone even in grey weather, but his shoulders were shaking, and there were tears on his face, real ones, not the kind people blink away quickly because someone is watching. These were the kind Nell recognized, the kind that came from somewhere that money couldn't reach. She pulled her scarf tighter and checked the last card in her hand. She had painted it herself the week before, a cardinal, bright red against white snow, perched on a branch of bare birch. She had been saving it for the right person. Grandma Harriet always said the lucky one finds the person who needs it most. Nell crossed the stone path and stopped a few feet from the bench. "Excuse me," she said, just loud enough to be heard over the wind. The man looked up. He was older, late 50s maybe, with silver at his temples, and a face that, when it wasn't crumpled with grief, probably looked like it ran things. His eyes were dark, red-rimmed now, startled by the presence of a small, serious-faced girl in a coat 2 sizes too large and hand-knit mittens that didn't quite match. "You've been crying for a while," Nell said. "It wasn't an accusation, it was just what it was. I thought you might want this." She held out the cardinal card. The man stared at it. He cleared his throat. "That's very kind. Did you make that yourself?" "I sell them, but this one's my last one and I'm not selling it, it's lucky." She paused. "You can have it." His name was Alistair Drummond, though she didn't know that yet, and he was the CEO of Drummond Development, one of the largest property developers in Toronto. He had spent the past 4 hours watching a judge in courtroom 7 sign away the final hope of completing a project that had consumed the last 8 years of his life. His father had begun it in 1998 on a handshake and a dream, affordable housing in Regent Park, back before the neighborhood had become fashionable. When his father died, Alistair had taken it on, and now a combination of fraudulent permits, misrepresented contracts, and testimony he could not explain had unraveled it completely. He was not crying about the money. He was crying because he had promised his father, at the side of a hospital bed, that the building would go up, and now it would not. He looked at the small hand extended toward him, mittens and all, and something in his chest shifted. "What's your name?" he asked. Nell Carver." "Alistair." He reached out and took the card carefully as though it were something fragile. "How much do your cards usually sell for?" $2. "But I told you this one's a gift." He turned the card over. On the back, in small, careful letters, she had written, "Hand-painted with love, November, Toronto." "You painted a cardinal," he said. "Cardinals stay through the winter," Nell said. "They don't leave when things get hard." Alistair looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Have you eaten today?" She hesitated, because Nell Carver was 11 years old, and she had learned to be careful about what she said to strangers, no matter how red their eyes were. "I know somewhere close," Alistair said. "A diner, best tomato soup in Toronto. I'd like to buy you lunch if that's all right, as a fair exchange for the card." She considered him. He didn't look dangerous. He looked sad, and hungry actually, the kind of hungry that had nothing to do with food. "Okay," she said. They walked 4 blocks east to a diner called Lorne's, which had been in the same spot since 1974 and smelled of coffee and toast and something frying. The booth by the window was warm, and Nell unwrapped her scarf and put her hands around the mug of hot chocolate the server brought without being asked. Alistair ordered coffee and the soup. He watched the girl across from him, the serious dark eyes, the way she sat with her spine straight even in a coat too big for her, the careful way she unwrapped the paper napkin around her spoon. "Do you sell cards every day?" he asked. "After school, and Saturdays." She looked at the table. "My grandma needs her heart medication. The one that works best for her isn't covered, so I help." The quiet steadiness in how she said it, not for sympathy, just as information, made Alistair set down his coffee cup. "Where are your parents?" My mum died 3 years ago. Car accident. She said it the way children say the hardest things, directly, because they have already said it enough times that the words have worn smooth. I never knew my dad. It's just me and Grandma Harriet. I'm sorry, Alistair said, and he meant it in a way he hadn't meant the phrase in a long time. Nell looked up. What were you crying about? At the bench. He considered deflecting. In his world, board meetings and legal briefings and charity galas, people didn't ask questions like that. But this child had offered him her last lucky thing without asking for anything in return, and she deserved an honest answer. My father made a promise, he said, to build something, housing, real housing, for people who needed it, affordable rents, a real building, not temporary. He died before he could finish it, and I've been trying to finish it for him. He paused. Today I found out it won't happen. Something went wrong a long time ago, in the paperwork, in the contracts, and I can't fix it. Nell was quiet for a moment. Then she said, my mum was an architect. Was she? She worked on buildings, big ones. Nell reached into the inner pocket of her coat and pulled out her phone in a cracked case. She swiped to a photo and held it across the table. It showed a woman in her early 30s, smiling at the camera in a hard hat and a yellow safety vest. On the vest was a small embroidered logo, a stylized D, interlocked with lines that suggested a foundation rising. Alistair's hand went still. That was his company's logo, the old one, the one they'd used until 2016. He took the phone carefully. Adrian Carver read the name tag below the logo, Junior Architect, Drummond Development. Your mother worked for my company, he said. His voice had gone very quiet. Nell blinked. That's your company, Drummond? It is. He set the phone down on the table between them. When did she leave, do you know? Grandma Harriet said she was let go when she was pregnant with me, about 12 years ago. Nell picked up her phone and looked at her mother's face. Grandma always said Mum had been working on something important, something she cared about a lot. She never talked about it much after. She just said some people didn't play fair. 12 years ago. The Regent Park project had been in early development then. Alistair's brother Colin had been managing the Toronto office while Alistair handled the Western expansion. Colin. The cold thing in Alistair's chest spread. Nell, he said slowly, I think I need to talk to your grandmother. He had called his driver back and sent him home. His office could wait. He walked back through the city with Nell, who moved through the streets with the particular confidence of a child who has learned the city the hard way. Which intersections had the longest lights, which blocks had shelter from the wind, which corner store would let you stand inside for 5 minutes if you looked cold enough. She led him to a low-rise building on Gerrard Street East, 4th floor, apartment 14. She knocked in a pattern, 3 short, 2 long, before turning her key. Harriet Carver was 71 years old and had the face of a woman who had seen a great deal and decided, on balance, to keep going anyway. She was sitting in an armchair by the window with a blanket over her legs and a library book open on her lap. And when Nell walked in, followed by a tall silver-haired man in an expensive coat, she closed the book with the careful deliberateness of someone who needed a moment to take stock. Grandma, this is Alistair Drummond, Nell said. He knew Mum, sort of. Harriet's eyes moved to Alistair's face. Something crossed her expression. Not fear, exactly. Recognition. The kind that comes when a name you've turned over in your mind for years finally appears attached to a body standing in your living room. Drummond, she said. Mrs. Carver. He stayed near the door. I want you to know I had no knowledge of what happened to your daughter. I'm only beginning to understand, and I may have it wrong. But if there's anything you can tell me... Sit down, Harriet said. He sat. She looked at Nell, sweetheart, the kettle. When Nell had gone to the kitchen, Harriet spoke carefully and precisely, the way someone speaks when they have rehearsed a thing for years, waiting for someone to finally be ready to hear it. Adrian Carver had been 26 years old when she took the position at Drummond Development. She was talented. Her professors had said so. The firm's own internal reviews had said so. And she had been assigned to the Regent Park affordable housing project within her first 6 months. She had believed in it. She had worked evenings and weekends on the design, drafting accessibility features nobody had asked for, but that she included anyway. thinking of the older tenants who would one day live there. And then she had found the discrepancy. She had been cross-referencing material cost invoices against the submitted project applications when she realized that a significant portion of the foundation budget had been redirected, not by accident. The falsified documents were careful, but not careful enough for someone who trusted numbers. She had brought it to Colin Drummond. Within 2 weeks, she had been let go. Her record had been annotated with language about performance concerns. Her access to the project files had been revoked. She was 31 weeks pregnant. She had kept everything. Every document she had copied before her access was cut. Every email. The original contract which she had been given to review for signatures. The contract that outlined a junior architect's 15% stake in the project's licensing royalties upon completion, a provision that had subsequently vanished from all official copies. Harriet crossed to the bookcase and reached behind a row of hardcovers to retrieve a large manila envelope, worn at the edges, wrapped twice in elastic bands. She held it out to Alistair with both hands. "She told me to keep it," Harriet said. "She said someday the right person would need it. I didn't know if that person would ever come." Her eyes were steady, but her hands were not. "She would want you to have this." From the kitchen doorway, Nell stood very still, a mug of tea in each hand, watching Alistair receive the envelope. She had not known what was inside it. She had only known it was important, the way children know that certain things in a household carry a weight that goes beyond their size. Alistair looked down at the envelope, then up at Harriet, then across the room at Nell. And something in his face, the grief that had been sitting there since the courthouse, since long before the courthouse, shifted into something harder and quieter and more purposeful. "She was right," he said. "She found it and she was right, and they knew she was right." Nell crossed the room and set the tea down on the side table. She sat on the footstool beside her grandmother's chair and took Harriet's hand. "Will the building actually get built now?" she asked. "If there's proof." Alistair looked at her. The cardinal card was still in his coat pocket. He had not put it down since she gave it to him. "I'll make sure of it," he said. What followed moved faster than he expected, and more quietly than he would have chosen. The documents in the envelope, examined by 2 independent forensic accountants and a former Crown attorney now in private practice, told a story that matched the gaps Alistair had spent years ignoring. Inconsistencies in the Regent Park files he had attributed to administrative confusion, testimony in the lawsuit that had seemed inexplicable until now. Colin Drummond resigned from the board of Drummond Development on a Wednesday afternoon. By Thursday, the matter was with lawyers. A civil suit followed. Alistair did not speak to his brother. He was not ready to, and he might not be for a very long time. The Regent Park project, his father's long unfinished promise, was resubmitted to the city with corrected filings and Adrian Carver's original design fully reinstated, including every accessibility feature she had drafted on evenings and weekends a decade before she died. Alistair covered Harriet's medical costs through a private arrangement, one that Harriet accepted only after Nell pointed out that accepting help gracefully was also a kind of generosity. He set up a trust for Nell's education, not with fanfare, not with any expectation attached. He asked Nell, once a little awkwardly, if she would like to stay in contact. She had looked at him with those dark, measuring eyes and said, "I know where your office is. I'll come by." She did, as it turned out. On Saturdays sometimes, with a new card in hand, the office staff learned to expect her. The Regent Park building opened on a warm Saturday in late May, when the city still smelled of last night's rain, and the elms along the main boulevard were finally fully leafed out. There were speeches, a city councillor, a housing advocate, a woman from the tenants committee who had been on the waiting list for 4 years. Alistair spoke last and briefly. He thanked his father. He thanked Adrian Carver by name and explained, simply, what she had done and what it had meant. He did not offer unnecessary details. He did not need to. Nell stood at the edge of the small crowd with her grandmother, who was in a wheelchair now, but had been absolutely clear that she would be there regardless. Harriet had Nell's hand resting on her arm, and when the ribbon was cut and the people around them applauded, Harriet leaned close and said quietly, "Your mother drew those windows, sweetheart. Every single one." Nell looked up at the building, 12 stories, red brick and large windows, a small courtyard at the base with bench seating, and a garden plot already staked out for the residents. On the wall beside the main entrance, in steel letters mounted against the brick, it read, "The Adrian Carver Wing." She stood there for a long time, not crying, not quite smiling, just looking, taking it in. The way her mother had looked in that photograph with the hard hat and the yellow vest, like someone who believed in what they were building, even when they couldn't yet see the walls go up. The cardinal card still sat on Alistair's desk, propped against the small lamp at the corner. He had not moved it. Some things, he had decided, belonged exactly where they landed. Nell reached into her coat pocket and took out a new card she had painted that morning. The same red bird, the same bare birch, but the branch this time was in early bud, the very edge of spring. She had not written anything on the back yet. She thought she might give it to the first family that moved in.